Our next session. And for this, I'd like to welcome on stage architect Muin Harris, EC member and head of Architects Welfare Committee, to introduce us to our next speaker and session. Over to you, Muin.
Thank you. Good evening to all. My absolute honor and pleasure to introduce Fareed Ismail. The pursuit of tomorrow. As he quotes, "We are always investigating and experimenting, working in harmony with the natural environment, shaping the future rooted in culture." Fareed Ismail is an architect, researcher, entrepreneur, graduated from the American University of Sharjah with a degree in architecture, founded the award-winning design firm X Architects in 2003. His design work addresses issues of contemporary society, urban identity, and architecture. Fareed's works has been widely recognized internationally through various awards, exhibitions, publications, and venues. He has lectured and addressed sustainable design and various other topics specific to climate and environment at worldwide universities and institutions. In August 2019, Fareed received the prestigious Aga Khan Award for Architecture for Design of Wasit Wetland Center. Congratulations, Fareed. Founded in 2003 with Ahmed Al Ali and Fareed Ismail, X Architects delivers genuine, future-proof designs, giving unique local voice from the region and beyond. Through our steps and by step, thorough process, working closely with clients, we are creating architecture of the future, making it more sensitive in the interactions with the environment, cultural values, society as a whole. In pursuit of the future, preserving the cultural identity, X Architects believes in design as a process. We research into creating a built environment that is adaptive and contextual. We see architecture as a language that speaks of place. Our sensible yet critical design approach recognizes the inherent complexity of modern-day buildings and harnesses the complexity to produce projects that are culturally robust, place-sensitive, and environmentally friendly. Waiting to see your wonderful presentation, Mr. Fareed. Thank you. Wonderful introduction. For you, please, the stage is all yours.
Jimmy.
This is the previous.
All right.
This is the point.
All right, great. Okay, great. Okay, hello everybody. Great, thank you very much, Architect Moin, for the introduction. And thanks a lot for the IIA for organizing such a great event. It's a real pleasure to be here today, to be back in India and the first time in Bangalore. I've been really enjoying since morning the talks, the lectures, the discussion, the talk with the students, which is always very unique in India. The students very much approachable. They come and they ask. They're very curious, which is quite very exciting always. Yeah, I mean, definitely we are living in a very fast society, and I'll be very specific, maybe the area where we are based. So we're based in Dubai, and we work across the Middle East. The cities are developing very fast, and in a way, constantly almost challenging their own kind of architecture and their own visual identity. So it's always a challenge for us and a question for us, what does it mean to design to the spirit of the time? How should we capture the spirit of the time, and how should we do the architecture that is contextual and that is belong to the place and it's timeless, but at the same time, it speaks to the time that, and speaks to our generation. I mean, looking at our city, I mean, as we walk through the city, always our experience is mainly you've got the street, you've got the building, and then we've got the public realm, or I would say street walks, which are beautified by landscape. Definitely, there's always this separation between the city and the nature. So, I mean, where we are is quite a very desertish environment, or maybe that's the most known ecology. So, always when you talk about Middle East, especially the Gulf, the desert becomes kind of the first thing that comes to our mind. Although kind of the ecology is very rich, you've got the wetland, you've got the sea lines, you've got the oases, and so on. But having said that, the way that the cities has been developed, it's developed around the cars, around the infrastructure, and it's almost we have kind of lived in this separation with the nature and the kind of the landscape, I would say, which our region kind of provide. For some reason, we have been dealing, or we've been doing projects in many contexts that are mainly, I would say, have environmentally sensitive kind of issues that needs to be tackled in a very specific way, like wetland, like deserts, like sea lines, and so on. And I'll be showing you today maybe a journey and the process, the way we go, the way we design step by step, the way we try to learn from the environment. Of course, when I refer to environment, that's not only its ecology, it's not only its geography, but it goes deeper into what is the culture of the place, the economy, the history, and what it takes to almost make the place and build the place. So I'll be maybe showing a couple of samples of how we learn from these contexts and how this context it becomes, or these forces of the context has become as a process to design architecture that is belong to the place and so on. This is the first project. This is the Wasat wetland. It's, the wetland is located in the periphery of two emirates. So on the right side, you have Sharjah, and the left side, you have Ajman. It's quite a very strategically located. It's almost a perfect land to be developed as a real estate. It has a lots of value, like many other wetlands, I would say, within our area. Having said that, this area was a kind of a dumped area, a construction dump area. And then over time, you had lots of toxic plant and bushes that had grown, which had, in a way, damaged the environment. So the whole idea was, how do we work on that? How do we purify the place? And how do we kind of rehabilitate the natural environment within this place? The government had started the process of the purification, the process of kind of removing all the toxic plants, which in a way started attracting kind of many birds, both are regional and the, I would say, migrant bird, as this was one of the few wetlands in the region that was still functioning as a wetland. It almost became the heaven for the birds. So they all were coming there, and that's where kind of they're nesting, they're kind of living, and so on. So the process started almost by looking at the section of the site. What could we do? Looking at the existing tree, what are the trees are indigenous, what are not indigenous, and kind of maybe harmful to the environment. We started by looking at the vegetation. We starting to looking at the purifying the existing water. Of course, had to be getting rid of the rubbish and all the, I would say, construction dump that they were there. As a result, it was almost 35,000 trees. They were replanted on the site, which, as you see, is created this kind of wonderful section. So in a way, it creates this dense environment around the site that separates the site from the surrounding urban noise, pollution, and so on. But at the same time, it provides a lot of food for the birds, lots of shade, and a lot of safe places for nesting for the birds and so on. So these were the environment as it has been regenerated. It's quite, as you see here, absolutely everything is natural, all the plants, all the bushes. The water table, definitely, it varies throughout the year. But again, it's quite a very vibrant and very lively environment. So we had to design a breeding, research, and a visitor center. And the idea was to educate the public about the bird endangered bird, and at the same time, the idea of the importance of rehabilitation and or cultural, or I would say, or natural heritage, and the importance of passing the natural heritage from generation to generation. So we started, like I would say, any other architecture project, looking at the site, trying to understand the context, what is the best views, what are the programs we have, the requirements even for the birds. So some birds, they need to have only north light. So how could we design an architecture that could really respond to that? And how we could even do a building that is sensible to the place and sensible to the bird, which attracts more birds rather than push them away or kind of creating, I would say, not a comfortable environment for them. So we started looking at the site. We found that there is this beautiful change of topography that happens on the site, that you have 2 levels. And we thought that maybe instead of building architecture and the landscape around it, what about we integrate the architecture and the landscape, and we camouflage the architecture with the surrounding. So this is the section that shows how I would say the visitor center, the cages around it, and the landscape, they all are integrated as one entity. So these are some of the image of the site, of the project as it was finished. Almost the birds, both the one that are, breeding, they were inside, and the one that they are kind of freed up, indigenous or migrant, they all are living in harmony in this kind of very natural environment. And as a human experience, again, we wanted to give a kind of a different route, kind of to respect, or kind of to minimize the interaction between the people and the birds on the site. So here, as you come in, you almost submerge yourself into the ground, and then you enter the gallery. And this is the look and feel. This is the architecture, how it is integrates with the surrounding natural environment. So almost this concept of zero architecture. So as the time passes, the trees are growing, the bushes are growing, and in a way they're overtaking the architecture. And actually, the people who are working and managing and functioning in this place, they always say that even when they have some birds that are in the cage, when you have migrant birds that are flying on top of it, the moment they see kind of their colleagues, they land in this place. And almost the approach to architecture has increased a lot, the population of the bird and the nesting, both naturally and breeding on the site. So this is the section, just to show how, again, the architecture in the section integrates with the surrounding. We have almost the level of the visitor center is a bit below the landscape level, and that would give a very, I would say, intimate and very close experience of the people to the bird. And the way we've designed this skin, you have the glass are tilted, both glass. So as a result, it reflects the surrounding environment, and the birds, they could be very close to the glass, but yet being very comfortable. As a matter of fact, sometimes I go there, I see the birds are nesting 20 to 30 centimeters away from the glass, and you could just sit there for an hour and watch them, and they are not neither disturbed nor kind of move, which is quite very significant. So these are some of the environments, from the inside, how the idea you view outside. Again, this idea of having a darker space inside was quite important, is because to avoid the birds flying into the glass and harming themselves. So we have the interior is quite always darker, and as I said, the glasses are tilted, they're reflecting the surrounding, and creates a very safe environment for the bird. These are some of the images of the people. I think it's always important to see how a building functions once it's completed, and how would it really, it takes a journey from the time you almost hand over to the client and it moves on. So this building has really become an educational facility. You have bird lovers, you have general public, you have students. It really is a pack of people. People go there to get educated about the natural environment, about the birds, about the breeding, the way the foods are made. There are donation places that people donate for the birds, and so on. So it's become a really active part of the society and part of the neighborhood. So it's some of the images of the site. Moving into, I would say, a different context, this is the historical fabric of Dubai called Shandaqa, which is next to the creek. Creek is always quite an important, I would say, ecology of Dubai, and it has always even played a significant part of the economical development of Dubai, because it was a way to bring the all the trading boats into the heart of the city historically, and Dubai was trading historically with the neighboring country as well as India for quite a long period of time. So we had to here do a kind of, again, a visitor and a multi-purpose hall, and then to regenerate 2 of the houses into museums. All the areas here for the Expo 2020, they had regenerated into kind of a cultural district. So currently, if you go there, there are many museums, there are many kind of auditorium or activities that kind of brings in people. So they needed a center. That's where it becomes the place for people to gather, to get to know about the area, history of the area, and to be a multi-purpose kind of place. Again, we started by researching the place, the history, the building material, which they used to use a lot arish, which arish is palm wood, and again, the quality of the shade and shadow that it gives in a very organic way, quite very significant. But at the same time, the use of the teak wood, which was quite very resilient to the environment that we were there. It used to be used both for the architecture as well as for the boat building. So we thought, okay, how could we really learn from these, but at the same time to design an architecture that is very modern, that is contemporary, but at the same time it sits well in this context. Our site was kind of a plaza. It was surrounded by this historical building. And we wanted to, it was quite a challenge how we could really minimize the impact and how we could do an architecture that talks in a very nice harmony, I would say, with this surrounding. So we started kind of using this idea of a roof that is made out of the teak wood, that it allows kind of, it's a bit translucent, allows shade and shadow to come in. It almost changes the interior or the surrounding effect based on the sun and the orientation and the color of the sky and so on. But at the same time, we wanted to maintain this concept of the plaza, this openness, which in a way, 6 months of the year, we could have an open building and it could function, especially as a kind of multi-purpose place. And the other 6 months, the idea to be able to close it and to make it an enclosed building. So these were the floor plans. So it shows how the building sits with the surrounding. But at the same time, to achieve, what we wanted to achieve, the lightness, the openness, we had to minimize the kind of amount of utility and infrastructure does a building have to make the building much lighter. So in this case, many of the utilities are kind of, especially the AC ducts and all of that, are integrated with the floor, which in a way first is kind of, it requires less energy, but at the same time, it reduces a lot of kind of systems in on the ceiling of the building. So that's the section that shows the building, how it talks to between inside and outside. And this is how the building almost sits within the surrounding. Looking at the building, yes, it's very modern, very contemporary, but it talks very well to the surrounding and to the creek. And that's the view from the other side, showing the building in relation to its surrounding. This is the outcome of the building. You have this roof that is almost floating. It has a column, of course, on the inside, which it's made out of the wood that historically being used in this area. There is the know-how. The color of it is very sensitively selected that talks to the surrounding. And then the idea was that we have the glass glazing panels, they're openable. So all the glazing, you could open them up in a good period of time, as you see them here. And you have kind of an open plaza, which could be kind of talk to the city and kind of evolve its surrounding and its urban context. These are some of the images of the project. I mean, the panels are almost 5 meter by 3 meter rotating, which each of them very easily they could be opened and closed. So again, showing how the building is talking to the kind of neighboring historical building and the way it sits within this fabric and in a way to kind of give the requirements, to fulfill the requirement of the project. Again, some of the images as the glazing opens up. And again, the idea of the shade and shadow was quite very important for us in this case. I mean, as I said, the building, it really changes its mood, its character, depending on the sun angle. And in our area, sometimes the sun gets all the way up to 90 degrees or 89 point something, which is quite very vertical, which you get a totally different feeling than if you're going at the sunset or if you're going early morning and throughout the year, it keeps changing. The way the doors are operated and they are opened up. With that, we regenerated two of the houses next to it. In this case, the houses, they were more or less, I would say, in a good condition. Of course, we had to protect lots of area of it. We had to kind of, respect all the existing condition. It's always challenging how you deal with MEP. You cannot cut, you cannot drill, you cannot do anything, but at the same time, you want to modernize the building. You want to bring in new technology into the building. You want to make sure that the building communicates with people in a very modern and very contemporary way. So these were the floor plan. So we started to define the journey, to curate the story. In this case, is the story of the creek, which we talks about how the creek and the importance of the creek to the economy of Dubai and how it was made, how it was built, and how it has been evolving, I would say, over time. So these are some of the images of the process of the design, the research, and how the old and new, they start to talk to each other, as you see them here. And these are the final product. I mean, all the walls, the flooring, the wood, in many cases, are regenerated, it were the existing one that has to be reinstated, yes, has been reinstated and put back in the place. Again, so here it shows the idea of the creek and how it acts as an urban connector connecting two sides of the Dubai, which is Deira and Bar Dubai, and at the same time, it's becoming a kind of an economical connector between different, I would say, cities around the Gulf. I mean, there's always, when you have historical fabric, when you're doing this, you want to add something, it has to be secondary wall built in order to protect the existing structure. The lighting or even the flooring has to be always, if you have to build something new, has to be elevated in a way always to respect what's new and what has been there historically. That's another house which was regenerated in the story of the, actually this one is the perfume museum, which again, it's, I mean, the perfume in our region is very much inspired by the Indian, I would say, perfume, oud and dehan oud and all of that, which majority of them are coming from India. So the burning wood and the smell of burning wood. So here it was, the whole idea was to explore the history of that in our region, and then how, and then it gave even the people the ability to test a different, I would say, perfume and to make their own perfume based on what they like and all of that. So here, as you see, so the idea of integrating the courtyard as part of the experience of the people, being part of the curatorial process. Again, the entrance, the doors are very sensitively kind of restored in these places. And the spaces, yet, I mean, definitely they are very small spaces as, I mean, environmentally, that's what's very, I would say, environmentally kind of friendly way for people to build their houses. The walls are quite very thick in this context. The spaces are very small. But again, within that, we had to kind of regenerate and bring in a new program and activate it in a kind of very modern way. So some of the images here. This is another project. Again, it's a restoration. It's in Al Ain, city of Al Ain, which is around 2 hours from Dubai. This house, the significance of this house is that one of the first houses built out of concrete, reinforced concrete, late 50s. But at the same time, it has a very vernacular architecture and vernacular look and feel. So we had to regenerate it. So this was the condition when we started the project. Definitely, it was in a very fragile condition. But in this case, we wanted to preserve almost everything that you see here. We wanted to make sure every facade, every column, every wall, every stone in this building has been preserved. And then we add to it in a way to protect it or to bring it to the today's, I would say, standard and the requirement. We started by looking at the history of the house, where it started. It has been, many phases, many adds up, bits and pieces. So the family started, and as the family grows, as the requirement grows, the economy grows. Between late 50s and then goes to 60s and 70s, and those were quite a time that the economy was growing. So you see that the house has been growing over time. And the idea, we had even new program that had to build into it. Now, in this case, we wanted to make sure that it's a cultural building, but at the same time, it's a very social and active place. So the program was very mixed. So it's not only museum, it's a museum, then it becomes a kind of a conference, it has an kind of interactive or kind of halls, it has cafes, it has art workshop. So it's quite a very mixed use. So the idea is to bring back people. So it's not people go there, we say, we've been to this museum, and that's it. But no, you could go back only for your morning coffee, or you could go back to paint, or you could go back for a library to read, and so on. So we started by almost doing a full laser survey of the project, fully in 3D, and identify different elements, I would say, that they were significant, that needed to be preserved on the place. And these were the conditions of the place. Both the time, we've almost been 50 years, so it's not in a very good condition. But at the same time, the way that it was built, because being the first, I would say, concrete construction in that city, it's not done in a very good way or a very good quality, I would say, of concrete. So the idea was, how could we work with this context? And how could we regenerate, and how could we respect every element within this project? So we went further. We analyzed the kind of elements, the textures, what is there, and how could we really preserve it? And what are the textures that we want to learn from, and we want to bring back, or we want to retain, or we want to maintain as we start to move forward? There's always this debate. What do we really take it back to the state of what it was 50 years ago, and what we keep it as what it is now, and the new intervention, how is it going to talk to the existing condition? So here, we went deeply into the place. Again, the construction technique is totally different. So you've got from masonry, stone blocks, all the way to concrete. You've got all the way to staircases. You have the concrete blocks. So almost every extension, you have, again, different construction technique that had been used based on the know-how of the laborers that they were working at that time on the place. So based on that, we did these categories to kind of, what elements to be conserved, what to be repaired, what to be replaced, if it really cannot be repaired, and what to be reinstated. So there are elements we know, we know the windows. Some of the windows are already there, as you see it here, but some of the windows are gone. So what does it mean? How do we reinstate it? And the new intervention, like for example, the full handrails are not there, they are gone, and there's no any historical kind of reference to how did it look like. So how do we deal with all of this different condition? So these were the kind of a matrix of kind of a conservation strategy for different blocks and different sections. And these were the floor plans. So definitely you see the existing one. And we had to build here the extension. The extension was to accommodate some new program. You have cafes, you have small offices, you have multi-purpose hall. And on the other side, it acts as a connector between the two buildings. But at the same time, this extension, it works in a way to reinstate the feeling of the courtyard which this house had. So the house had a very active courtyard, which was a kind of courtyard that's always a private place. So we wanted to reinstate that in a kind of by building, I would say, the extension of the same position where the compound walls used to exist. So these are some of the drawings. It shows a different component and how old and new are coming together. And these were the process of regenerating every, I would say, facade. Of course, quite very intense. As you see here, we start to look at the window detail and how could we really regenerate it, reinstate it. We look at the decorative element, we look at the doors, and there were some element that is not there, and then we start to do a new intervention that it shows that this is an intervention of 2022, but at the same time it talks very nicely kind of as to the historical fabric. So it almost becomes the new intervention, it becomes part of the journey and part of the intervention, the history of the building as we move on. To do the extension, we wanted, again, to talk to the existing one. We wanted to do architecture that is very much a kind of works in harmony. Of course, more contemporary. It has its own language of contemporary and so on. But at the same time, it has a kind of a reputation or elements that has been inspired by the existing structure. So we looked at the proportion. We looked at the idea of the reputation, the idea of the arcade. So you always have an arcade, which used to be used as a way to protect the building from the heat, from the sun. And then you have the actual usable spaces. So we started based on that kind of, again, the project is an oasis. It's where you have lots of palm trees and you have lots of trees. So we wanted to learn from all of that and to develop the architecture that is more modern and more contemporary, but at the same time inspired from that. So as you see here, I mean, you have the skin, which is inspired from the arcade, and then you have the arcade itself, you have the interior, and you have this steel elements that is kind of repetitive. So this is the image of the building as it was repaired. You might see different color in different section. We had to do a laser kind of section cut through different colors that was done over the site to kind of understand what was the original color that was used. And at the same time, go back and talk to some people who have lived there to get a kind of an oral confirmation of the colors and the texture of the project and of the building. So these are some of the images. That's the courtyard. The element you see here in the middle, it's called Manama. I mean, it's a place that people used to sleep at night or used to spend the time in the afternoon. So this was, I mean, it's the original structure has been not there, so that's an interpretation of that. And this is a view from the other side. I mean, as you see, the colors changes based on the time of the development, based on the actual color and actual kind of original palette of the site. It shows the relation between the new extension. As you see here, you always have this repetition. You have this steel that kind of creates the rhythm, the sense of arcade, but at the same time, it's very light and it's done in a very modern and contemporary way. I mean, definitely, as we were working this project, a lot of archaeology we find. You see here and here. So as we used to find the archaeology, we document them, and in some cases, we show it to the public, and in some cases, we just frame them and we protect them under the ground. It depends on the strategy and the significance of each element that we used to find. So again, some of the images of the site. And that's the image looking different layer and complexity of the place. The idea of the arcade. Again, these windows, as you see, whatever was there, we have reinstated it, and whatever is not there, it's a new one. We learn from the original look and feel, but in this cases, the new ones, they all are double glazed. They meet the kind of the requirement of today's authority and shows the contrast between the time of that time and today. So again, this different kind of smaller spaces and the way they are integrated. Again, I mean, we went room by room. This was the only room maybe we had an image. So this was an image of Sheikh Zayed and Sheikh Mohammed bin Khalifa, who was the owner of the house. They're sitting here with a British delegate within the same room. So the idea is how we regenerate the room and we create a kind of similar sitting area, but in a more modern and contemporary way. Some of the exhibitions here, again, showing the history of the house, the history of Sheikh Mohammed bin Khalifa. And these are multi-purpose rooms that they become classrooms, they become an educational facility, they become an art place. And as you see here, again, as we were building, we found some archaeologies in this part. And as we find, we had to change the drawing, evolve the drawing, change the structure, move the foundation to allow for this kind of moment to happen within the project. So that's the image of the building at night. And this is the image of the extension on the other side, where you have the cafe. I mean, if you see here, the building is kind of elevated. The whole skin is elevated. As we started construction again, we found here traces of the historical compound wall, which was defining the courtyard. So we almost pushed all the foundation back, and we cantilevered the edge here. So to protect the existing foundations that was all the way happening there. But at the same time, it was quite important to position the building in the same place where the compound wall was, to give the same feeling of the courtyard and the same scale of that courtyard. So that's the image. I mean, it's quite a very active place. I mean, you go in the evening, this is full of people. Nowadays, the chair comes all the way to the courtyard. The landscape, we use compacted sand, which is kind of very strong, very resilient, but at the same time, it's the original material of the site, but to be able to use it as a kind of public building and in a very kind of, I would say, more traffic area. This is another project. It's quite maybe different in different contexts, different environment. It's an empty quarter in Saudi Arabia. I mean, not too far from the border to UAE. And definitely it's an empty place as you go there. So you just have dunes, and you have beautiful sky, and there is absolute silence there. So the level of silence as you go there, you feel like one of your senses are kind of not really functioning. It was a resort, and we thought, okay, what could be the best for this place? What kind of experience we want to give to people going to this area? So we started again by investigating, going deeply into the desert. I mean, when you look at the desert, you feel there is nothing, but when you go deeply into it, there are other natural elements that I think one could learn from. You've got sabkhas, where you've got the salt, there is water. I mean, we got surprised under subfas 1 meter below, there is full of water. It's a salty water, but there is water. There are flowers. There are these beautiful flowers we found on the place. Of course, the sand property, the sky, and so on. So we thought, how could we really learn from this and give experience to people that is very unique to this place? How people could go there and experience this natural element and this natural environment. So in a way, the way the land art works, so we wanted to have a minimum impact on the place, but at the same time, kind of giving the people this really, I would say, unique and kind of sensible environment. So we started by mapping what could be done, activities, mapping a journey, how we want people to experience the site. In between the dune, what could be the best experience, arrival experience, sometimes being on the tip of the dune or becoming the different sections or different height of the dune. And based on that, we got kind of, this, inspirations for different assets. So here is maybe one of the inspiration that the idea of tracing on the sand. So as you walk on the sand, you start to leave these traces, which in many cases, these traces they have used as a kind of to regenerate this new ecological, or create its own ecology, oasis, or a place for farming, and so on. So we thought, how could we really create a kind of a landscape or architecture that it's almost built itself within the sand and give people a very deep experience of the sand. So here were some of the sketches that was done, the idea of learning from the sand, how the sand reacts, the idea of how we could maximize the view, give every unit a privacy, but at the same time they could have a maximum view of the surrounding. And these were kind of one of the assets that is built itself into the sand dune. So as you go there, you're almost part of this desert. You have a kind of, it's the only moment that you have a very close scale. So you are almost you could define the scale. You could be in the desert. You could be very close to the sand. You could have your own privacy. And it's kind of a very unique and different moment. Again, this flexibility of opening the architecture, what is required, and closing the architecture, what is required. We went on, we looked at other assets. These were other elements. We found these beautiful flowers on site. And what we got really inspired, the way that these flowers, it almost grows in this heat and protects its core against this kind of harsh, warm, and sun environment that kind of we have. So we thought that how we could really do architecture that is inspired from this, but at the same time looking at the regional architecture, this idea of verticality is kind of very familiar, which almost it gives a maximum view to the surrounding, and it's kind of give a totally different experience to people as you are in that place. So these were a series of sketches that was done, kind of from relearning from that vertical element and how could become an architecture. And these were the final image. Of course, this was the image of the competition that we won. It has evolved, it has developed quite significantly. As you see here, you have the skin that opens up and it closes down based on the requirement, privacy, environmental, and so on. But again, people could really go up and have a really wonderful experience of the place and of the surrounding of the dune. So again, some of the sections, the way it works, different floor plans. Again, we had different units, group one, suites, connected, unconnected, and all of that. As you see here, they have been defined in different way. So that's the view. I mean, looking at it from the top, and that's your view as you go into the resort. So you have almost this beautiful 360 view of the surrounding, which is very unique, and it could only happen in this empty quarter. We looked at other assets. We had the arrival halls. We had the kind of restaurants and amenities, which in this case, it's the idea, the conceptual approach was to use a place that is a peak, that is quite a very unique, and give people very unique experience of the place. And again, inspired by the movement of the sand. So here, the whole architecture is inspired by the movement of the sand and the way that the sand, it folds and unfolds itself. The last asset we had was the spa, which was quite, again, important. We wanted to have this relation between the spa and the salt, which is in Sabha. You've got a lot of salt, you have a lot of salty water, and we work with a spa expert how we could really use this as an element to kind of give people, again, a unique and different experience. So these were conceptual approaches. So we had a surface, I would say, activity, and then we had the blow activity, and these were the look and feel, which is totally, I would say, in contrast maybe to the other asset, but at the same time, it's very kind of contextual to the place, to this part of the desert that we were designing. So this is the look and feel of the inside. And these are the different assets and the different experience that people could go from one place into another one. Of course, I mean, for us as architects, we have a responsibility to save our resources. So we have used multiple, I would say, both active and passive strategies in a way to preserve the energy and to do architecture that could perform much better and could reduce a lot of, I would say, energy consumption and or resources. Here I've got one more project. It's quite a different project. It's a competition we have won. And it's a project to do a vertical farming in an urban context. So the idea was how could we, if it's possible, how could we really cut this thousands of kilometers of transportation of the food and kind of bring it, the idea of the farming to the neighborhood. So we started by looking at the place. I mean, or the cities are always organized in a very horizontal way. And then you have the nature, which is very vertical. I mean, the trees are always vertical. So the idea was how could we really learn from these two and to do the architecture that could accommodate the necessity, the requirement of the trees, the plants, and all of that, but at the same time is interactive with people. It was quite very important for us that it doesn't become a place that it's only a factory or a place for production, but rather than it becomes a cultural, a social, an educational place, and a place that people will start to go and learn about the agriculture and about the ecology and so on. So these were different layers that we studied, how the building could react to the sun, the idea of the vertical farming, again, the idea of the stack cities, how we could have different programs coming into it, and again, the idea of the green thread, which I would go through it, and how could we really create an interactive place between the people and the building. So these were the initial sections. As you see, you have these layers of the vertical pods. You have the programs. You have the journey, the public journey, and then you have the skin, which I would come to it in a couple of slides. So we started with these vertical pods, and we had kind of working with experts to identify and define what kind of plants, species that could be used in this place. And then to design these pods that are kind of independent, that are sustainable, and they could generate the kind of food and the kind of agriculture we need within the environment. So here it was, again, we wanted to emphasize on that by kind of celebrating and educating people a different agriculture that exists in different parts of Saudi Arabia, and make that as a part of the people's and public journey. So as people come in, they start to walk and to start to explore the place, as you see here, and they get educated, and they could even pick up their own kind of agriculture products as they move on. So in a way, it becomes even a way to educate, the kids, educate, the public, and so on. So that's how the building works. As you see, again, we wanted to make it a mixed use. It has offices, it has lab, it has a research center. It has a kind of educational facility, cultural, social. And the whole idea is that how we make the building active and alive. So it's not a place that you only go to do one function, but it's a place that could really, multiple things could really happen. You've got a market zone, which people could go, and within the neighborhood or people, they could come there, pick up their food. You have cafes that you could go and use, that they cook for you food that is produced in this place. So these are some of the look and feel as part of the experience. You see quite how the scientists and the public, everything is integrated, but at the same time, they all have a privacy. The idea of food and beverage is always very important, and how you integrate it and make it part of the visitor's journey. And here is the idea of the skin. So as you see here, the skin, it has a multiple function. Of course, in one case, it becomes the structure element, but at the same time, it becomes this breathing, I would say, element of the building. The building, it's kind of, we have this chilled pipes that runs through the skin, which cools down, in a way, the atmosphere and the environment within the building. So many parts of the building from the inside are not fully enclosed. They're open and just with a bit cool down environment, and with the plantation and all of that, it almost brings the temperature to a comfort zone. And then, of course, you have this idea of the bracing and all of that. So all of that together, it creates this skin that is quite, it gives us this architecture. We looked at different users and different journey. As I said, again, it was very important for us that the building becomes active throughout the day. Yes, morning, maybe you could have kids from the school. Afternoon, you could have, families there coming in, and people could go there for their dinner. So it becomes a kind of a building that rotates, and it has a different timeline. You could go a journey on Friday, 10 a.m., for your brunch, and all the way till the market, till you finish the work. So that's some of the look and feel of the interior, and how integrating the farming, the human experience, the human journey, and that's the way the building sits within the landscape. Thank you very much.
What an awesome presentation, Fareed, and diverse thought process. I'm sure everybody's excited after your presentation. Any questions from the audience? We're running short of time. So if there's something, I think Sharik wants to ask a question.
Good evening, sir. Diverse projects have different contexts and a lot of differences. Sir, my question to you is something that I have been thinking for my thesis, that's adaptive reuse. And seeing that you have a few projects which have incorporation of old and new in it, and the restoration. So what are the different challenges that you faced because of climate in Dubai? And are those challenges that you faced in any way related to the purpose of that space that you've created? Did that change due to that climatic response?
Sure. Look, definitely we have a very harsh environment. So, the summer goes to 50 degrees, and then we have a very short, we don't have a winter, we just have a kind of 25, 26 degrees for a couple of months. And always when you work in historical fabric, historical environment, those are the fabric that people had learned over hundreds of years how to build a building, how to build their city that adapts to this culture and adapts to this environment. Now, when we design in those contexts, of course, first, how we could learn from that. We never want to throw all this knowledge away, but at the same time, we don't want to be nostalgic to kind of, in terms of its visual identity, to regenerate or kind of copy-paste the visual identity. So it's always how we could really do architecture that it works within that climate, it works within that environments that we are in, but at the same time, it responds to the, to the requirements of the projects. So, if I want to say the project use is mainly has been defined based on the requirement of the area, of the maybe bigger requirement of the city and all of that. But again, we start to make sure that the environment works around that program to make sure the function, it works within that building.
We're running
Yeah,
short
hello.
of time.
Moin.
So I think we'll stop at this question. And we'll
Moin.
follow on. Farid is, yeah, somebody else?
Yeah, I'm
wants to
here.
ask a question? Yes, Mr.
Yeah,
Anand.
sir, we enjoyed watching that sand dune project,
Yes.
that all those resort effect villa kind of a thing. My main question is, how is the water brought in? What is the source of water, and how do you treat the water after the usage?
I didn't get how.
He's asking what is the source of water that you all have?
Okay, all right, okay. We are still exploring in this site. We are almost where we are now. We have two options in place. One option to make it a kind of off-grid project, 100%, which everything is being regenerated on site. We've got sun, we could have energy, and then we have got water. It's not like sweet water, but again, how we could regenerate that. So that option we're exploring, and we've moved it quite very far, and it is possible to do it. But then we have the alternative option that is, there is certain settlement of mainly oil settlement within that area, that if we could relink it back to that place. So, but again, within the site itself, there is water. It's not a portable water, so the challenge is how we could really turn that one into the water. So that is the exploration we're currently pushing it.
Thank you. So Dubai, the city of superlatives, you gave us a good contrast of how a sensitive work could be established there. Thank you, Farid,
Thank you.
for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
very
Thank you,
much.
sir. Thank you.
I think you can give him a bigger round of applause. Thank you, architect Farid Ismail. I would now like to invite on stage our immediate past president of IIA, architect Divya Kush, and architect Lali Chand Zakarias to kindly come up on stage and honor and felicitate architect Farid Ismail. Okay, we don't have architect Divya Kush with us, so I would like to welcome on stage Ashutosh Agarwal, architect Ashutosh Agarwal. Thank you. Once again, big thank you